Don't wait up for me, Beatrice. I don't answer to you anymore. Those words stung like a slap across my face. But what I discovered while she was out that night changed everything forever. When she came pounding on my door at midnight in the pouring rain, begging and screaming to be let in, I did something that left my entire family in absolute shock. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Please follow my story until the very end and comment which country or city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. I never imagined that at 73 years old, after living a full life of dignity and purpose, I'd find myself standing in what was supposed to be my safe haven, feeling like an unwanted guest, an inconvenience, a burden that everyone wished would simply disappear. My name is Beatrice, Eleanor Whitmore, and for the past 8 months, I've been living in what I foolishly thought would be my home. But I was wrong, so very terribly wrong. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because understanding how I got here is crucial to understanding why I made the choice I did when my daughter-in-law came knocking at midnight. 2 years and 3 months ago, my beloved husband of 47 years, Thomas Whitmore, passed away after a long and brutal battle with Alzheimer's disease. Thomas was my everything, my rock, my partner, my best friend. We'd built a beautiful life together in our charming Victorian home in Rosewood Springs, a small town about an hour north of Portland. The house sat on 2 acres of land with gardens that Thomas had lovingly maintained for decades, a wraparound porch where we'd spent countless summer evenings, and enough memories packed into every room to fill a dozen lifetimes. After Thomas died, I was lost, completely and utterly lost. The silence in that big house was deafening. Every corner held a memory, every room echoed with his laughter, and I found myself talking to him as if he were still there, still sitting in his favorite leather chair by the fireplace, still calling me Bee in that warm voice that had comforted me through every storm we'd weathered together. My son, Christopher, noticed my struggle. Christopher is my only child, and he'd always been attentive, loving, and protective of me. He's 42 years old now, a successful corporate lawyer at Morrison & Blackwell, one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms. He'd call me every few days, checking in, asking how I was managing, if I needed anything, if I was eating properly, sleeping well. "Mom, I'm worried about you," he said during one of his visits about 6 months after Thomas passed. "The house is so big and you're all alone. What if something happens? What if you fall or get sick and there's no one there to help you?" I assured him I was fine. I had neighbors, friends from church, my book club. I wasn't completely isolated, but the truth was I was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely in a way that no amount of friendly visits or phone calls could quite fix. That's when Christopher presented what seemed the perfect solution. "Mom, Vivian and I have been talking," he said, referring to his wife of 7 years. "We have that huge house in Silver Lake Estates, 5 bedrooms, and it's just the 2 of us rattling around in there. We'd love to have you come live with us. You could have your own space, your own bathroom, and we'd be right there if you needed anything." Vivian, my daughter-in-law, Vivian Celeste Morrison, before she married Christopher and became Vivian Whitmore. She was 35 years old, 11 years younger than my son, and she worked as a high-end real estate agent for Prestige Properties, dealing exclusively with luxury homes in the Seattle metro area. I'd never quite felt comfortable around Vivian, if I'm being completely honest. There was something about her that felt calculated. Every smile seemed rehearsed, every compliment felt hollow. Every gesture of affection toward Christopher seemed performed rather than genuine. But I told myself I was being an overprotective mother, seeing problems where none existed. Christopher loved her, and that should have been enough for me. "Are you sure Vivian wants this?" I asked Christopher carefully. It's a big commitment, having your mother-in-law move in. I don't want to be a burden. Christopher said, Mom, don't be ridiculous. You could never be a burden. Vivian's the one who suggested it, actually. She said it would be wonderful to have you there, that you could keep each other company when I'm working late. That last part should have been my first warning sign. Christopher was always working late, sometimes until 9 or 10 at night, often bringing work home on weekends. But I pushed my concerns aside and agreed to think about it. The decision became easier when I had a bad fall that winter. I slipped on ice on my front steps and broke my wrist. I spent 3 days in the hospital, and Christopher was beside himself with worry. When he picked me up to take me home, he took a detour to his house instead. Just for a few weeks, Mom, until your wrist heals and you're steady on your feet again. Please, I can't stop worrying about you in that big house all alone. Those few weeks turned into a month, then 2 months, and gradually Christopher began working on me again about making the move permanent. Mom, why don't you just stay? Sell the house in Rosewood Springs. You said yourself the maintenance is getting to be too much. Stay here with us. I resisted at first. That house held 47 years of memories with Thomas, but Christopher was persistent, and honestly, being around people again, hearing voices in the house, not eating dinner alone every night, was healing something inside me that I hadn't realized was broken.
Finally, 4 months ago, I agreed. I listed my beautiful Victorian home in Rosewood Springs, and within 2 weeks, I had a cash offer from a young couple expecting their first child. They loved the gardens, the porch, the whole character of the place. It broke my heart to sign those papers, but I told myself I was doing the right thing. I was moving toward my future, not clinging to my past. The sale went through, and I moved permanently into Christopher and Vivian's home in Silver Lake Estates with my most precious belongings. My clothes, my photo albums, some of Thomas's favorite books, and the antique jewelry box he'd given me on our 25th anniversary. That's when everything changed. The very first night after the sale was finalized, after my money from the house was safely deposited in my bank account, Vivian's entire demeanor shifted, like someone had flipped a switch. Beatrice, I've been thinking about the room arrangements, she said, as I was unpacking the last of my boxes. Her voice had lost the false sweetness it had carried for months. The guest room, where you've been staying, it's really too nice to use permanently. Christopher and I were thinking we'd like to convert it into a home office for me. I need a proper workspace for my real estate business. I stared at her in confusion. But where will I stay? Oh, there's the small room at the end of the upstairs hallway, she said casually, as if she were discussing where to store holiday decorations. It's smaller, obviously, and it doesn't have an attached bathroom. You'll have to use the hall bathroom, but it'll be fine for your needs. You don't have much stuff anyway, right? The room she was referring to was barely 10 feet by 10 feet. It had been used as a storage room, filled with boxes and old furniture. It had one tiny window that looked out onto the neighbor's fence, and the walls were a dingy beige that hadn't been painted in years. Vivian, I don't understand, I said slowly. Christopher said I'd have my own space, my own bathroom. Plans change, Beatrice, she smiled, but it was cold. This is still our home, and Christopher and I need to make decisions that work best for us. I'm sure you understand. I wanted to talk to Christopher about it, but he'd already left for work that morning, and by the time he got home at 9:30 that night, Vivian had already moved half my belongings into the tiny storage room. When I tried to bring it up at dinner, she cut me off smoothly. Your mother and I were discussing the room situation today, weren't we, Beatrice? She agreed that the smaller room makes more sense for her needs, more cozy and intimate. I opened my mouth to protest, but Christopher looked so tired, so worn down by his long day at the firm, and Vivian was staring at me with such cold challenge in her eyes that I found myself nodding. Yes, it's fine. I heard myself say, the smaller room is fine. Christopher smiled with relief. That's great, Mom. I'm so glad you're being flexible. That's one of the things I love about you. You're always so easy to get along with. And just like that, I was moved into a room half the size I'd been promised, with no private bathroom, with barely enough space for my bed and a small dresser. But that was only the beginning. Within a week, Vivian had established rules. So many rules. Beatrice, I need to talk to you about household guidelines, she said one morning over coffee. She'd actually printed out a list on expensive stationery. Now that you're living here permanently, we need to establish some boundaries so we can all coexist peacefully. She slid the paper across the kitchen table to me. I picked it up with shaking hands and read through the guidelines. Household guidelines for Beatrice. Kitchen use is limited to breakfast before 8 a.m. and light snacks. All lunch and dinner meals will be prepared by household management, Vivian, and served at designated times. The main living areas, the living room, dining room, den, are to be used only when Christopher and Vivian are present or have given explicit permission. Laundry days for Beatrice are Tuesdays and Fridays only. Please do not use the washer and dryer on other days as it interferes with household routines. When Christopher and Vivian have guests, Beatrice should remain in her room unless specifically invited to join. TV watching in common areas should be coordinated with Vivian's schedule to avoid conflicts. All personal phone calls should be taken in Beatrice's room to maintain household peace and quiet. I read through this list 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. These weren't guidelines for a family member. These were rules for an unwelcome boarder, someone being tolerated but not wanted. Vivian, this seems a bit excessive, I said carefully. I'm Christopher's mother, not a tenant. Exactly, she said. You're not a tenant. Tenants pay rent. Tenants contribute to the household. You're here as a favor, Beatrice. The least you can do is respect our home and our rules. But I sold my house, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I gave up my home to be here. That was your choice, Vivian said coolly. No one forced you to sell. And let's be honest, Beatrice, that old house was falling apart. The gardens were overgrown, the roof needed replacing. The whole place was one bad winter away from serious problems. We did you a favor by giving you a way out. I felt tears stinging my eyes. Christopher said this would be my home too. Christopher says a lot of things. Vivian stood up and took her coffee cup to the sink. But at the end of the day, Christopher and I make the decisions about this house together, and we've decided that these guidelines are necessary. Now, do you have any questions, or is everything clear?
I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw that list in her face and demand to speak to my son. But Christopher had already left for work, and something in Vivian's expression told me that if I made a scene, things would only get worse. "Everything's clear," I whispered. "Wonderful." She smiled her cold smile. "I'm so glad we understand each other." From that day forward, I lived by Vivian's rules. I ate breakfast alone before 8, then retreated to my tiny room. I came down for lunch and dinner when summoned, ate quietly, while Christopher talked about his cases and Vivian talked about her real estate deals, then returned to my room. I did my laundry on Tuesdays and Fridays only. I watched TV on the small old television Christopher had set up in my room rather than risk using the main living room. I became a ghost in that house, moving silently through the hallways, taking up as little space as possible, trying desperately not to be an inconvenience. Christopher noticed nothing, or perhaps he chose not to notice, which was somehow worse. When he was home, which was increasingly rare, Vivian transformed. She'd take my arm and guide me to the dinner table, asking sweetly about my day. She'd insist I join them in the living room to watch a movie, sitting between Christopher and me on the couch, playing the devoted daughter-in-law while my son beamed with pride at his wife's kindness. The moment Christopher left for work, the mask dropped.
Vivian would barely acknowledge my presence. If I accidentally left a book on the living room table, she'd place it outside my bedroom door with a pointed look. If I took longer than 15 minutes in the hall bathroom, she'd knock sharply and remind me that other people needed to use it too. But it was the isolation that hurt the most. Vivian had a way of scheduling all her girls' lunches and client meetings during the day, leaving me alone in the house for hours. When I suggested I might invite some friends from my book club to visit, she looked horrified. "Oh, Beatrice, I don't think that's a good idea," she said. "This house isn't really set up for entertaining your demographic. Maybe you could meet your friends at a restaurant or something." My demographic, as if being 73 years old made me and my friends somehow unsuitable for her precious house. The loneliness I'd felt in my own home in Rosewood Springs was nothing compared to the isolation I felt living in that house with Vivian. At least in my own home, I'd been alone by circumstance, not by design. Here, I was being actively excluded, deliberately pushed to the margins of a life that was supposed to include me. And then, about 3 months ago, I started noticing the phone calls. Vivian had always been on her phone a lot, texting clients, checking listings, coordinating showings. But these calls were different. She'd take them in the backyard, or in her car in the driveway, or behind the closed door of what had once been my guest room and was now her home office. And when she emerged from these calls, she'd be flushed, almost giddy, in a way I'd never seen her around Christopher. One morning, I came downstairs early, before my designated kitchen time, because I'd heard Vivian's voice drifting up through the heating vents into my room. I found her in the kitchen, her back to me, her phone pressed to her ear. "I know, baby. I know. Tonight's perfect. Christopher has that conference call with the Tokyo office. He'll be locked in his study until at least 10. We'll have hours." My breath caught in my throat. Baby? Christopher never called her baby. He called her Viv, or sometimes darling, but never baby with that particular intimate inflection. I must have made some sound because Vivian spun around and saw me standing in the doorway. For just a moment, her face showed pure fury, quickly masked by her usual cold composure. "Good morning, Beatrice. You're up early. It's not even 7:30 yet." "I couldn't sleep," I said, my heart pounding. "Who was that on the phone?" Her eyebrows rose. "Excuse me? Who were you talking to? You called them baby." Vivian's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Beatrice, I think you're confused. That was a client, and I certainly did not call them baby. Perhaps you should get your hearing checked." "I know what I heard," I said, finding courage I didn't know I had. She took a step toward me, and I instinctively took a step back. "Let me make something very clear to you, Beatrice. What happens in this house, who I talk to on the phone, where I go and what I do, none of that is any of your business. Do you understand? I'm your son's wife." "Exactly. Christopher's wife, not your daughter, not your friend. You have no relationship with me beyond the one I choose to give you. And right now, I'm choosing to give you very little. So I suggest you go back to your room, stay out of my business, and stop listening in on my private conversations." I turned and walked back upstairs, my legs shaking. When I reached my tiny room, I sat on my bed and tried to make sense of what I'd heard. Was Vivian having an affair? The thought seemed both obvious and impossible. Christopher adored her, gave her everything she wanted, worked himself to exhaustion to provide the lifestyle she demanded. Why would she risk that? But I couldn't unhear what I'd heard. "Baby, tonight's perfect. We'll have ours." From that day forward, I started paying closer attention, and what I noticed filled me with dread. Vivian started going out more frequently, always with a different excuse. Client meetings, property showings, networking events, dinner with potential investors. She'd leave the house dressed to kill, wearing clothes that seemed far too elegant for business meetings, heavy perfume that lingered in the hallway long after she'd left. And she always came home late, sometimes not until 11 or midnight, slipping in quietly, assuming I was asleep in my room. But I'd lie awake, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, hearing her shower running at midnight, wondering where she'd been and who she'd been with. I tried to talk to Christopher about it, carefully, without making direct accusations. "Christopher, honey, does Vivian always work such late hours?" I asked one Sunday when he was actually home for dinner. He smiled proudly. "Mom, Vivian is absolutely crushing it in her career right now. She's on track to be one of the top agents in the entire Seattle metro area. I'm so lucky to have such an ambitious, driven wife." But does her job really require so many evening meetings? High-end real estate is a 24/7 business, Mom. Her clients are busy executives and international investors. They can only meet outside normal business hours. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know you're not used to modern career women, but this is just how it works now. Vivian's incredible at what she does." I felt the sting of that comment. Not used to modern career women, as if I were some relic from another era who couldn't possibly understand how the world worked. Never mind that I'd worked as a school librarian for 30 years, managing budgets and programs and technology integration. Never mind that I'd balanced career and motherhood long before it was fashionable. But I didn't argue. Christopher believed in his wife, and, without proof, anything I said would just sound like the paranoid suspicions of a bitter mother-in-law. So I watched, and I waited, and I gathered the pieces of a puzzle I desperately didn't want to complete. Then came the night that changed everything. Tuesday, October 17th. I'll remember that date for the rest of my life. Christopher had mentioned at breakfast that he had a late conference call with their Tokyo office to finalize a major merger. He'd be locked in his study from 7 p.m. until at least 10, possibly later. He wouldn't be available for dinner. At 6:30, Vivian came downstairs dressed in a black cocktail dress that hugged every curve, her hair styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless. She looked stunning, and she was clearly not dressed for showing houses. I was sitting in the small alcove off the kitchen, the only common area where I felt I could sit without violating Vivian's rules. I was reading a mystery novel, trying to lose myself in someone else's problems for a while. Vivian grabbed her Chanel purse and her keys, then paused when she saw me sitting there. "Going out?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I have a showing," she said, not meeting my eyes as she checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. "The Riverside property. Very important client." "At 7 o'clock at night? In a cocktail dress?" Her jaw tightened, and she turned to me fully. "Some clients prefer evening viewings, and this particular client expects a certain level of sophistication from their agent. Not that she would understand anything about high-end real estate." I set my book down carefully. "What time will you be home?" And that's when she said it, the words that would echo in my mind for hours to come. Vivian walked over to where I sat, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She looked down at me with such contempt, such pure disdain, that it felt like a physical blow. "Don't wait up for me, Beatrice. In fact, don't wait up for me ever again. I don't answer to you. Do you understand? I don't owe you explanations about where I go or what I do. This is my house, my life, and I come and go as I damn well please." I stared up at her, shocked by the venom in her voice. "I'm Christopher's mother," I said quietly. "I'm not trying to control you. I was just making conversation." "No," she snapped. "You're judging me.
You sit here in your little corner like some kind of disapproving watchdog, keeping track of my every move, monitoring when I leave and when I come home. It's pathetic, Beatrice. You're pathetic. The words hit me like slaps. Vivian, I never... You know what your problem is? She continued, leaning closer. You're jealous. Jealous that Christopher chose you. Jealous that you're not the most important woman in his life anymore. Well, here's a reality check for you, you bitter old woman. You're only here because Christopher felt sorry for you. You had nowhere else to go, no one else who wanted you, so he took you in out of pity. Tears were burning in my eyes now, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. This is supposed to be my home, too, I whispered. This is my home, mine and Christopher's. You're just occupying space, taking up room that could be used for something actually valuable. And honestly, Beatrice, I'm getting really tired of having you here, hovering around, judging me, making me feel guilty for living my life. She straightened up and adjusted her purse on her shoulder. So here's how this is going to work from now on. You're going to stay in your room when I'm not here. You're going to stop asking me questions about where I go or what I do. You're going to make yourself as invisible as possible because I'm done pretending to care about your feelings or your opinions. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just sat there feeling every one of my 73 years weighing on me like stones.
Oh, and Beatrice? She paused at the door and looked back at me one last time. If Christopher asks where I am tonight, tell him I'm showing the Riverside property. He knows that one sometimes takes hours. He won't question it because, unlike you, he actually trusts me. The door slammed behind her with such force that the windows rattled. I sat there, in that alcove, in that house that wasn't mine, in the life I'd foolishly traded my independence for, and something inside me finally shattered. Don't wait up for me. I don't answer to you anymore. The clock on the wall showed 7:15 p.m. Christopher was already locked in his study on his conference call. The house was silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I looked down at my hands, these 73-year-old hands that had held my son as a baby, that had cared for my husband through his final difficult years, that had created a life of meaning and purpose before I'd given it all up to become invisible in someone else's home. And in that moment, something changed. Something fundamental shifted inside me. I was done. Done being small, done being silent, done accepting treatment that no human being, let alone a mother, should ever have to accept. If Vivian wanted me to stop waiting up, I'd stop waiting up. If she wanted me to stop watching, I'd stop watching. But I wouldn't stop paying attention. And what I was about to discover in the hours ahead would prove that my instincts had been right all along. Vivian wasn't working late. She wasn't showing properties. She was living a double life built on lies and betrayal. And when she came pounding on the door at midnight, soaking wet from the rain, desperate and terrified and begging to be let in, she was about to learn that this bitter old woman occupying space was done being pushed around. The game was about to change, and I was going to be the one changing it. After Vivian slammed the door and left me sitting in that alcove with her cruel words still ringing in my ears, I remained frozen for nearly 10 minutes. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking 7:25 p.m., then 7:30, then 7:35. Each minute felt like an hour as I processed what had just happened. You're pathetic, Beatrice. You're only here because Christopher felt sorry for you. I'd been called many things in my 73 years on this earth, but never pathetic. Never unwanted. Never a burden that someone was merely tolerating out of obligation. The words cut deeper than any physical wound could have. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, the initial shock and hurt began to transform into something else, something harder, something that felt almost like clarity. For 8 months, I'd been making myself smaller, quieter, more invisible, trying desperately not to be an inconvenience.
I'd followed Vivian's ridiculous rules, accepted her casual cruelties, tolerated her dismissive treatment, all because I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for my own dignity. But what had my compliance earned me? Nothing but more disrespect, more isolation, more pain. And now, sitting alone in this house while my daughter-in-law was out doing God knows what with God knows who, wearing a cocktail dress and lying about showing properties, I realized something crucial. I had nothing left to lose. Vivian had already taken everything from me: my independence, my home, my self-respect, my relationship with my son. She'd reduced me to a ghost haunting the margins of a life that should have included me. What more could she possibly do? I stood up from my chair, my knees protesting after sitting for so long, and walked slowly up the stairs to my tiny room. But instead of retreating into my usual pattern of reading until I fell asleep, I sat down at the small desk Christopher had squeezed into the corner for me and opened my laptop. If Vivian was hiding something, and every instinct I had screamed that she was, then it was time I stopped being passive and started paying attention. Real attention. The first thing I did was something I should have done months ago. I went to Vivian's business website for prestige properties. Her profile page showed her professional headshot, gleaming and perfect, along with a list of her recent sales and client testimonials. I scrolled through the listings she supposedly specialized in: luxury homes in Bellevue, waterfront properties in Kirkland, exclusive estates in Medina. Then I clicked on her calendar of open houses and client events. According to the website, she had nothing scheduled for tonight. No evening showing, no client meeting, nothing at all after 5 p.m. My heart began to pound. So the Riverside property showing was a lie, just as I had suspected. I clicked back to her main page and studied her photo more carefully. Something about it nagged at me. The background looked familiar somehow, but I couldn't quite place it. I was about to close the browser when I noticed a small icon at the bottom of her profile page, a link to her Instagram account. I'd never been much for social media. Thomas and I had always been private people, and after he died, the thought of posting cheerful updates about my life felt impossible. But I knew Vivian was active on Instagram, always taking photos of houses and staging shots of herself at various properties. I clicked the link and was taken to her public Instagram profile, @VivianPrestigeHomes. The account had over 8,000 followers and was filled with glossy photos of beautiful houses, artfully arranged interior shots, and carefully curated images of Vivian, herself, at various work events. I scrolled back through her posts, looking for something, anything that might give me insight into where she really went on all those late nights. Most of the posts were exactly what you'd expect from a real estate agent's professional account. Property photos with captions about square footage and luxury amenities. Shots of Vivian holding sold signs in front of expensive homes. Motivational quotes about success and ambition. But then I found something interesting. About 3 months ago, the nature of her posts had started to change subtly. Mixed in with the professional content were personal photos that seemed oddly out of place for a business account. Vivian at an expensive restaurant, captioned, "Celebrating success with someone special." Vivian holding a bouquet of red roses, captioned, "When your hard work is appreciated." A sunset view from what looked like a hotel balcony, captioned, "Sometimes you need to escape and recharge." I clicked on each photo, studying them carefully. In the restaurant photo, you could see the edge of someone's hand across the table from her. A man's hand wearing an expensive-looking watch, not Christopher's watch. I'd given Christopher his watch, a Timex that had belonged to his father. This was something much more expensive, probably a Rolex or Patek Philippe. In the photo with the roses, there was a reflection in the window behind her. If you looked closely, very closely, you could see a man's silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, Definitely not Christopher's lean build. And the hotel balcony photo had a geotag, the Apex Hotel. Seattle. One of the most expensive hotels in the city, known for its discretion and its appeal to wealthy business travelers and people seeking privacy. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots of each photo. This wasn't proof of an affair. Not exactly, but it was certainly suspicious. And it fit with everything I'd been noticing. The late nights, the expensive clothes, the intimate phone calls, the lies about work. I was about to close Instagram when I noticed that Vivian followed several accounts that seemed unusual for a real estate agent. Luxury lifestyle blogs, high-end fashion accounts, and one that caught my attention, an account called @SeattleEliteEvents. I clicked on it and found myself looking at an account that posted about exclusive parties, charity galas, and private events for Seattle's wealthy elite. Most of the photos showed beautiful people in expensive clothes at glamorous venues. And there, in a post from 2 weeks ago, I found Vivian. The photo showed a group of well-dressed people at what the caption described as an intimate gathering at the Belmont Club for distinguished Seattle professionals. Vivian was in the photo, wearing a silver dress I'd never seen her wear around the house, laughing with a group that included several men in tuxedos. But what made my blood run cold was that she was standing very close to one man in particular. His arm wasn't quite around her waist, but it was close. Too close. And the way they were looking at each other, anyone could see there was something between them. I zoomed in on the man's face. He was probably in his early 50s, handsome in that distinguished way that comes with age and money. Silver hair, perfect teeth, confident smile. And he was wearing the same expensive watch I'd seen in the reflection of Vivian's restaurant photo. I clicked on the comments section of the post. Most were generic compliments and congratulations to the event organizers, but one comment caught my eye. From an account called @Marcus Rothschild Investments. Wonderful evening with wonderful company. Until next time, V. V. Vivian. I clicked on the @Marcus Rothschild Investments account and my stomach dropped. The profile belonged to Marcus Rothschild, CEO of Rothschild Investment Group, one of the largest private equity firms in the Pacific Northwest. His profile was public, and it was filled with photos of his luxurious lifestyle, private jets, yacht trips, exclusive resort vacations, charity events with Seattle's elite. And there, scattered throughout his feed, carefully but noticeably, were photos that included Vivian. Never the main subject, always in the background or on the edge of group shots, but she was there, at a wine tasting in Napa Valley 2 months ago, at a charity auction in downtown Seattle 6 weeks ago, at a private art gallery opening 3 weeks ago. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Vivian wasn't just having an affair. She was having an affair with one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in Seattle, a man who could give her access to a lifestyle that even Christopher's substantial lawyer salary couldn't provide. The Apex Hotel, the Belmont Club, private jets and yacht trips. This wasn't some casual fling with a coworker. This was a calculated relationship with a man who could elevate Vivian into the absolute highest echelons of Seattle society. I looked at the clock on my laptop. It was 8:45 p.m. Christopher was still locked in his study on his conference call. Vivian had been gone for over an hour, supposedly showing a property that didn't exist on her calendar to a client she'd never mentioned. Where was she right now? With Marcus Rothschild? At another expensive hotel? At his penthouse apartment? The possibilities made me feel sick. But I couldn't stop now. I had started pulling at this thread, and I needed to see where it led. I went back to Vivian's Instagram and started looking at the accounts that frequently liked and commented on her posts. Most were other real estate agents, clients, or friends I vaguely recognized from the few times I'd met Vivian's social circle. But there were several accounts that liked every single one of her posts, especially the personal ones.
Marcus Rothschild Investments was one of them, of course, but there were others too. @Luxury Seattle, @Elite Members Only, Belmont Club Official. I clicked through each one, finding a world I'd never known existed. A world of exclusive clubs and private events where Seattle's wealthiest power players socialized and made deals. And Vivian had somehow inserted herself into that world. I thought about the timeline. When had this started? I scrolled back through Vivian's Instagram, looking for the first appearance of this new lifestyle. It seemed to begin about 4 months ago, right around the time I'd moved in permanently after selling my house. Had that been a coincidence, or had Vivian been planning something all along? A horrible thought occurred to me. What if Vivian had encouraged Christopher to convince me to sell my house, not out of kindness, but because she wanted my money? The sale of my Victorian home in Rosewood Springs had netted me $680,000 after paying off the remaining mortgage. It was sitting in my savings account, meant to be my security for my remaining years, my nest egg for medical expenses and eventual assisted living if I needed it. Had Vivian been eyeing that money all along? I felt sick to my stomach, but I forced myself to keep investigating. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Marcus Rothschild Seattle. Dozens of articles popped up: business profiles, charity event coverage, society page mentions. I started reading, taking notes as I went. Marcus Rothschild, 54 years old, divorced 3 years ago from his wife of 25 years in what was described as one of Seattle's most expensive divorce settlements. He'd kept his business empire, but had paid his ex-wife a reported $50 million settlement. Since then, he'd been frequently photographed at social events, always with different beautiful women on his arm, never the same one twice, until recently. In the past few months, according to the society pages and social media accounts I was now obsessively scrolling through, Marcus had been seen repeatedly with real estate professional Vivian Whitmore. The mentions were subtle, careful never to explicitly call her his girlfriend, but the implication was clear to anyone paying attention. Marcus Rothschild and companion Vivian Whitmore attended the Seattle Symphony Gala. Investment mogul Marcus Rothschild was spotted at Conless with real estate agent Vivian Whitmore. Rothschild Investment Group's Marcus Rothschild enjoyed a private box at the Seahawks game with several guests, including luxury real estate specialist Vivian Whitmore. They were being seen together, publicly, often, and apparently no one in my family had noticed or thought to mention it to me or Christopher. Or maybe people had noticed, and they simply assumed Christopher knew and approved. Maybe they thought my son was one of those modern husbands who didn't care if his wife had a wealthy patron helping her career. The thought made me want to cry. My beautiful, brilliant son, working himself to exhaustion to provide for a wife who was betraying him with one of the richest men in the city. And I was the only one who seemed to see it? I looked at the clock again. It was 9:30 p.m. Christopher's conference call was probably wrapping up. Vivian had been gone for over 2 hours now. I made a decision. I grabbed my phone and opened the rideshare app that Christopher had installed for me months ago, insisting I use it instead of driving at night. I'd never actually used it before, too intimidated by the technology and too conscious of being a burden by spending money on something Christopher would have to reimburse me for later. But tonight, I wasn't worried about being a burden. I typed in my destination, the Apex Hotel, Seattle. Within minutes, a driver named Jamal accepted my request. He'd be here in 8 minutes. I grabbed my purse and my phone, threw on the nicest coat I'd brought with me from my old house, a navy blue wool coat that Thomas had always said made me look distinguished, and quietly made my way downstairs. I could hear Christopher's voice from behind his study door, still on his conference call, discussing merger details and international regulations. Part of me wanted to knock on that door, to tell him everything I'd discovered, to force him to see what his wife was really doing. But I had no proof beyond suspicious social media posts and my own intuitions.
Christopher would defend Vivian, would find perfectly reasonable explanations for everything, would probably accuse me of being paranoid and jealous, just as Vivian had said. No. I needed real proof. I needed to see with my own eyes what Vivian was doing, where she really went on these late nights. I slipped out the front door just as Jamal's Toyota Camry pulled up to the curb. The night air was cool and damp, typical for Seattle in October, with the smell of rain hanging heavy in the atmosphere. "Beatrice?" Jamal asked me as I approached the car. He was a kind-looking man in his 30s with a warm smile. "Yes, that's me." I climbed into the back seat, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "The Apex Hotel downtown? Right?" "Yes, please." As we pulled away from the house in Silver Lake Springs, I looked back at the glowing windows, at the home where my son sat oblivious in his study, and at the life that had seemed so perfect from the outside, but was rotting from the inside. The drive downtown took about 25 minutes in the light evening traffic. Jamal tried to make conversation at first, asking if I was visiting someone at the hotel or attending an event, but I gave short, polite answers that discouraged further questions. I needed to think, to plan what I was going to do when I got there.
What was I going to do? Walk into an expensive hotel and demand to know if my daughter-in-law was there with another man? Ask the front desk to check their guest registry? I had no legal right to that information, and even if I had, what then? But as we got closer to downtown Seattle, passing the glowing storefronts and busy restaurants, I realized I didn't need a detailed plan. I just needed to know the truth. If Vivian was at that hotel with Marcus Rothschild, I'd find a way to confirm it. And if she wasn't, well, then I'd have to keep investigating until I found where she really was. The Apex Hotel rose 30 stories into the Seattle skyline, all glass and steel and expensive elegance. Jamal glowed up to the covered entrance where a doorman in a crisp uniform waited to open car doors for arriving guests. "This is it," Jamal said. "Do you need me to wait for you?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure how long I'll be." "No problem. Just request another ride when you're ready. Have a good evening, Beatrice." I climbed out of the car and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering hotel. Every window glowed with warm light. Behind any one of those windows, Vivian could be with her lover right now, laughing about her foolish husband and his pathetic mother. The doorman approached me with a professional smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Apex. Are you checking in?" "No, I'm meeting someone," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He opened the door for me, and I stepped into a lobby that took my breath away. Marble floors, modern art installations, sleek furniture arranged in intimate groupings. Everything spoke of wealth and exclusivity and discretion. The lobby was busy with guests coming and going, couples dressed for expensive dinners, business people in sharp suits heading to the hotel bar. I felt desperately out of place in my simple wool coat and practical shoes, but I straightened my shoulders and walked with as much confidence as I could muster toward the lobby seating area. I needed to think. I couldn't just wander the halls of the hotel looking for Vivian, but I also couldn't stand at the front desk demanding information about guests. That's when I saw her. Not Vivian, not yet. But as I scanned the lobby, trying to figure out my next move, I saw a familiar silver dress in the hotel bar, visible through floor-to-ceiling glass walls. My heart stopped. I moved closer, staying behind a large marble column where I could see into the bar without being easily noticed. There she was, Vivian, sitting at a corner table in the bar, wearing that silver dress from the Instagram photo. And across from her, leaning forward with an expression of intimate conversation, was the man I recognized from the photos, Marcus Rothschild. They weren't touching, at least not that I could see from my vantage point. But everything about their body language screamed intimacy. The way Vivian leaned toward him, laughing at something he said.
The way his hand rested on the table between them, his fingers inches from hers. The way they looked at each other, like they were the only two people in the world. I watched them for maybe 5 minutes, my hands gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles turned white. At one point, Marcus reached across the table and tucked a strand of hair behind Vivian's ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. She closed her eyes and smiled, a soft, genuine smile I'd never seen her give to Christopher. Then Marcus signaled their server, signed something, presumably the check, and stood up. He offered his hand to Vivian, and she took it. They walked together out of the bar, not toward the lobby exit, but toward the bank of elevators. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I couldn't follow them to the elevators. That would be too obvious. But I didn't need to. I knew where they were going. To a room. Together. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and did something I never thought I'd do. I took a photo of them as they waited for the elevator. Marcus had his arm around Vivian now, and she was leaning into him, her head on his shoulder. The photo was slightly blurry because my hands were shaking, but it was clear enough to show my son's wife in an intimate embrace with another man. The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, Marcus bent down and kissed Vivian. Not a friendly peck. A real kiss, deep and passionate and unmistakable. Then the doors closed, and they were gone. I stood there behind the marble column, staring at the closed elevator doors, feeling like the ground had dropped out from beneath me. I'd suspected, I'd investigated, I'd found evidence. But seeing it with my own eyes, seeing my daughter-in-law kissing another man in the lobby of an expensive hotel was different. It made it real in a way that Instagram posts and suspicious phone calls never could. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed to think clearly now. I had a photo, but was it enough? Christopher would want more than a single blurry photo. He'd find ways to explain it away, to make excuses for Vivian. I needed something more definitive. I walked slowly toward the hotel's main desk, an idea forming in my mind. The young woman behind the desk looked up with a professional smile as I approached. "Good evening. How may I help you?" "Yes, hello. I'm supposed to be meeting my daughter here, but I seem to have forgotten what room she's in. The reservation should be under Rothschild." It was a risk. The desk clerk could refuse to give me information, but I was a 73-year-old woman, clearly confused and harmless looking. Maybe she'd take pity on me. The clerk's smile dimmed slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm not able to give out guest room numbers for privacy reasons."
Oh, I let my face fall, playing up the confused elderly woman angle. It's just that she's expecting me, and I don't have my phone working properly to call her. I'm not very good with technology, you see. The clerk's expression softened a bit. "I could call the room for you and let them know you're in the lobby." "Would you? That would be so helpful. It's Rothschild, Marcus Rothschild." She picked up her phone and dialed. After a moment, she said, "Mr. Rothschild? This is the front desk. I'm sorry, what's your name, ma'am?" This was it, the moment of truth. If I gave my real name, Vivian would know I was here, and she might flee or come up with a cover story. But if I didn't, the clerk might get suspicious. "Tell them it's Beatrice, his old friend." The clerk relayed the message, then listened for a moment, her expression growing puzzled. "I see. Thank you." She hung up and looked at me with barely concealed pity. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Rothschild says he doesn't know anyone by that name. Are you sure you have the right hotel?" "Oh," I let confusion cross my face. "Oh dear, I must have gotten mixed up. I'm so sorry to trouble you." "No trouble at all. Would you like me to help you call your daughter?" No, I'll figure it out. Thank you so much for your help." I turned and walked away from the desk, my mind racing. So Marcus had claimed not to know me.
which meant either the desk clerk hadn't mentioned a woman was waiting for him, or he and Vivian had decided to deny my presence rather than come down and face me. It didn't matter. I had what I needed. I knew where they were, I knew what they were doing, and I had a photo, blurry as it was, showing them together. But I wanted more. I wanted something Christopher couldn't deny or explain away. I found a seat in the lobby, with a clear view of the elevator bank, and settled in to wait. They couldn't stay in that room forever. Eventually, they'd have to come out, and when they did, I'd be here. The minutes ticked by slowly. I watched couples and business people come and go, watched the night staff change shifts at the front desk, watched life continue normally around me while I sat there clutching my phone and my evidence of betrayal. At 10:45 p.m., the elevator doors opened and Vivian stepped out. Alone this time. Her hair was slightly messed, her lipstick gone, but she'd clearly tried to compose herself. She looked around the lobby cautiously, then pulled out her phone and sent a text. I shrank back behind my newspaper, one I'd picked up from a nearby table to use as cover, watching her over the top of the pages. She walked quickly through the lobby and out to the valet stand. Within minutes, her BMW was brought around and she drove away into the night. I waited another 5 minutes, then requested a ride back to Silver Lake Estates. As Jamal's car carried me back through the city streets, I stared at the photo on my phone. The photo that proved everything. The photo that would destroy my son's marriage and break his heart. But it was the truth, and Christopher deserved to know the truth. The house was dark when I arrived home at 11:20 p.m. Christopher's study light was off, meaning he'd finished his call and probably gone to bed. Vivian's car wasn't in the driveway yet. I let myself in quietly and climbed the stairs to my tiny room. I transferred the photo from my phone to my laptop, making sure I had multiple copies backed up. Then I sat on my bed, fully dressed, and waited. At 11:45 p.m., I heard Vivian's car in the driveway. I heard her key in the lock, her footsteps on the stairs, the shower running in the master bathroom. She was washing away the evidence of her evening, scrubbing off another man's cologne, preparing to slip into bed next to my unsuspecting son. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling of my tiny room, and knew that tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would tell Christopher everything. I would show him the photo, the Instagram posts, the evidence of Marcus Rothschild and Vivian's relationship. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come out. But what I didn't know yet, what I could possibly not have known as I lay there in the darkness, was that Vivian's affair was just the beginning of the story. The real discovery, the one that would change everything and put both our lives in danger, was still to come. And it would begin with a single phone call I'd overhear the very next day, a call that would reveal that Vivian wasn't just having an affair. She was involved in something far more dangerous and far more criminal than simple adultery. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that elevator door closing on Vivian and Marcus, their bodies pressed together, his lips on hers. I saw my son's face, imagined the devastation that would shatter across it when I showed him the truth about his wife. By the time pale morning light filtered through my small window, I decided on my approach. I would wait until Vivian left for the day, then I'd sit Christopher down and show him everything. The Instagram posts, the society page mentions, the photo from last night. He'd be hurt, devastated, but at least he'd know the truth. At 6:45 a.m., I heard movement in the house, shower running, footsteps in the hallway, the coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen. I got dressed in my simple navy pants and cream sweater, gathered my laptop and phone, and steeled myself for the conversation ahead.
But when I came downstairs at 7:30, ready to talk to Christopher, I found only Vivian in the kitchen, dressed in her typical work attire, a tailored burgundy suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked completely composed, showing no signs of guilt or worry about the night before. She barely glanced at me as I entered. "Christopher left early," she said, pouring coffee into a travel mug. "Emergency meeting about the Tokyo merger. He'll be at the office all day." My heart sank. I'd have to wait even longer to tell him. Vivian grabbed her designer bag and keys, then paused at the kitchen door. "Oh, and Beatrice, I hope you took my words to heart last night about staying out of my business and keeping to yourself." Her eyes met mine with a cold challenge. "I'd hate for things to become even more uncomfortable around here." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a decisive click. I stood alone in the kitchen, rage and frustration boiling in my chest. She had no idea that I knew, no idea that I'd followed her last night, that I'd seen her with Marcus, that I had evidence of her betrayal. She thought she'd successfully intimidated me into silence and submission. But I wasn't silent anymore, and I definitely wasn't submitting. I poured myself a cup of coffee and was heading back upstairs to organize my evidence when Vivian's cell phone rang. Not her personal phone. She'd taken that with her. This was a second phone, one I didn't even know she had, lying on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl where she must have forgotten it in her rush to leave. The phone rang again, vibrating against the granite countertop. The screen lit up with an incoming call from M.R., Marcus Rothschild. My hand hovered over the phone. Should I answer it? Let it go to voicemail? Before I could decide, the ringing stopped. But a moment later, a text notification appeared on the locked screen. M.R. Last night was incredible. When can I see you again? My pulse quickened. Then another text appeared. M.R. Also, we need to talk about the timeline. My lawyer says we should move faster than planned. Timeline? Lawyer? What were they planning? Another text. M.R. Once the divorce is finalized and you're free, we can make it official. My attorney thinks 6 months is realistic if we push. I stared at the phone screen, my mind reeling. Divorce? Vivian was planning to divorce Christopher? But of course she was. That's where this was heading. She was going to leave my son for Marcus Rothschild and his billions. But there was something about the phrasing that bothered me. Once you're free could mean once Vivian was free from Christopher. But combined with my lawyer and the divorce is finalized, it sounded like Marcus was talking about his own divorce. But he'd been divorced for 3 years already. Unless... Another text appeared, and this one made my blood run cold. M.R. Don't worry about the prenup issue. Once we're married, you'll have access to everything. Trust me. Prenup? Married? Access to everything? Vivian wasn't just having an affair with Marcus Rothschild. She was planning to marry him. But the timeline references, the lawyer comments, the urgency, something about it all felt wrong. Felt calculated in a way that went beyond a simple extramarital affair. The phone rang again, and this time I made a split-second decision. I answered it. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end. "Vivian, you sound different." "This isn't Vivian," I said quietly. "This is her mother-in-law, Beatrice." Another pause, longer this time. Then Marcus Rothschild's smooth, cultured voice came through with an edge of irritation. "I see. And why are you answering Vivian's phone?" "She left it here by accident. But I'm glad she did because now I know what you two have been doing." "Look, Mrs. Whittemore, whatever you think you know, this is between Vivian and your son. It's complicated and, frankly, it's none of your business." "It's my business when my son is being betrayed," I shot back. "You should be ashamed of yourself, breaking up a marriage." To my shock, Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. "Breaking up a marriage? Lady, I'm not breaking up anything. If anything,
I'm doing your son a favor by taking that gold-digging witch off his hands. I froze. What? Oh, you didn't know? His voice was full of bitter amusement now. Your precious daughter-in-law has been playing both of us. She's been telling me she's miserable in her marriage, that she married your son for stability but never loved him, that she's been waiting for the right moment to leave him. Meanwhile, she's been bleeding me dry with loans and investments that never seem to pay off. My mind was spinning. I don't understand. Here's the situation, Mrs. Whittemore. Vivian approached me 8 months ago at a charity event. She was charming, beautiful, attentive. She told me she was unhappily married to a lawyer who worked all the time and neglected her. She said she was planning to divorce him but needed financial help to establish her independence first. Like a fool, I believed her. You gave her money? Tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. She said she needed it to expand her real estate business, to establish herself as a top-tier agent so she could support herself after the divorce. She said once she was free and we were married, she'd pay back every penny and we'd build a life together. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. But she's not divorcing Christopher.
Exactly. I finally figured it out last week when I saw her at a restaurant with your son. She introduced him to a client, played the devoted wife perfectly. That's when I realized she's been conning me. She has no intention of leaving your son. She's just been using me as her personal ATM while maintaining her comfortable marriage. Last night, I said slowly, at the Apex Hotel, was supposed to be our confrontation. I told her I knew what she was doing and I wanted my money back. She begged me to give her more time, said she'd been planning to tell your son everything but was waiting for the right moment. She was quite convincing, crying about how much she cares about me, how difficult this all is for her. His laugh was bitter. I almost believed her again. But I'm done. I want my money back, and if she doesn't return it, I'm going to tell your son everything myself. My mind was racing through the implications. How much money are we talking about? $150,000. Maybe more. I'd have to go through my bank records to know exactly. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. $150,000. Vivian had been systematically stealing from Marcus Rothschild while pretending to have an affair with him, using his infatuation to fund what? Her lifestyle? Her business? Mr. Rothschild, I said carefully, I think you and I need to talk in person. There's more going on here than either of us realized. What do you mean? I mean that if Vivian has been stealing from you, she might be stealing from my son too, and possibly from others. I need to know everything. When did this start? How did she convince you to give her money? What exactly did she promise you? There was a long silence. Then Marcus said, "The Café Venetian on 5th Street. Do you know it? I can find it. Meet me there in 1 hour, and Mrs. Whittemore, bring any evidence you have about her activities. If we're going to stop whatever game she's playing, we need to compare notes." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at Vivian's forgotten phone, my mind reeling with this new information. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic fraud. Vivian was running some kind of con, manipulating Marcus Rothschild for money while maintaining her marriage to Christopher. But why? What was she doing with all that money? I looked at the time. It was 8:15 a.m. I had 45 minutes before I needed to leave for the cafe. I grabbed Vivian's phone and started scrolling through it, hoping it wasn't password protected beyond the lock screen. It wasn't. Or rather, it opened with a simple 4-digit code that I guessed on my third try, 2580. The middle column on a phone keypad, something people often used when they wanted a quick, forgettable password. What I found in that phone made the Marcus Rothschild situation look simple by comparison. The phone had only a few apps, messages, a banking app, and several encrypted messaging programs I didn't recognize. But the regular text messages were damning enough. I opened the thread with TC. The messages went back 5 months. TC, deposited another $8K into the account you set up.
This is getting expensive, V. Vivian, I know, baby, but the business opportunity is incredible. Once my partner finalizes the commercial property deal, you'll get triple your investment back. TC, you said that last month. Vivian, these things take time. Trust me. Have I ever let you down? I open the JB thread. Similar pattern. Promises of business investments, requests for money, assurances that huge returns were coming soon. The amounts varied, $5,000 here, $12,000 there, but they added up quickly. I open the banking app next, dreading what I might find. It required a password, but I tried the same 2580 code and it worked. The account that opened wasn't in Vivian's name. It was registered to something called V. Morrison Properties LLC, a business account. And the balance made me gasp out loud. $487,000! Nearly $500,000 sitting in an account I'd never heard of, connected to a business entity I didn't know existed. I clicked through to the transaction history. Deposits came in regularly from multiple sources. Wire transfers from Marcus Rothschild, checks from TC, Trevor Carson, according to the memo line, JB, James Brennan, DP, David Porter, and the others. Cash deposits. Money being funneled into this account from multiple men, all of them apparently believing they were investing in Vivian's business ventures. But the withdrawals were even more interesting. Large cash withdrawals every few weeks, transfers to offshore accounts, payments to luxury retailers, high-end spas, exclusive clubs, and one recurring payment that made my heart skip a beat. A monthly transfer of $15,000 to something called Pacific Crest Holdings. I searched for Pacific Crest Holdings on my phone. It took several minutes, but I finally found a reference in a business filing database. Pacific Crest Holdings was a real estate investment company, and according to public records, it had recently purchased a luxury penthouse condominium in downtown Seattle for $2.3 million. The purchase date was 4 months ago, right when Vivian had convinced me to sell my house and move in permanently. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Vivian wasn't just stealing money from wealthy men, she was building a second life. A penthouse apartment downtown funded by fraud and manipulation. Was she planning to leave Christopher and live there? Or was it part of some larger scheme?
I took photos of everything with my own phone. The text messages, the bank account, the transaction history. Evidence of what looked like systematic fraud against multiple victims. Then I carefully put Vivian's phone back exactly where I'd found it and went upstairs to get my things. I needed to meet Marcus Rothschild and tell him that his $150,000 was just the tip of the iceberg. The Café Venetian was a small, upscale coffee shop in downtown Seattle, the kind of place where business people had discreet meetings and tourists couldn't afford the $12 lattes. I arrived 10 minutes early and found a table in the back corner where we could talk privately. Marcus Rothschild arrived exactly on time, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was even more handsome in person than in his photos, with that distinguished silver hair and the confident bearing of someone who'd never questioned his place at the top of the social hierarchy. But today, he looked tired, worn down. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual confident smile was missing. "Mrs. Whitmore?" He extended his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Call me Beatrice." I shook his hand and gestured to the chair across from me. "And I think you're going to want to sit down for what I have to tell you." Over the next hour, I showed Marcus everything I'd discovered. The Instagram posts, the society page mentions, my photos from the Apex Hotel. Then I showed him what I'd found on Vivian's phone that morning. The messages from multiple men, the secret bank account, the evidence of what looked like a systematic con operation. Marcus's face grew darker with each revelation. By the time I finished, his hands were clenched into fists on the table. That conniving, manipulative. He stopped himself, took a deep breath. "I can't believe I was so stupid. She played me perfectly.
the beautiful younger woman who seemed genuinely interested in me, who laughed at my jokes, who made me feel like I was more than just my bank account. He laughed bitterly. Meanwhile, she was running the same scam on at least 5 other men. 6, that I counted, plus whatever she might be taking from Christopher that I don't know about yet. "Your son," Marcus said, his expression softening slightly. "Does he know anything about this?" "Not yet. I was planning to tell him about the affair today, but now," I gestured helplessly. "This is so much bigger than I imagined. It's not just infidelity, it's fraud, possibly money laundering. She's been building a second life with stolen money." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I need to call my lawyer. If she's defrauded me out of $150,000, I want her prosecuted." "Wait." I put my hand on his arm. "If we go to the police now, Vivian will lawyer up immediately, and we might not get all the evidence we need, and she might have ways to make the money disappear or claim it was all legitimate business loans." "What are you suggesting?" I'd been thinking about this on the drive over, formulating a plan that felt both terrifying and necessary. "I think we need to find out exactly what she's planning. That penthouse she bought, the offshore accounts, the multiple men she's conning. There's a bigger picture here that we're not seeing yet." "So what do? We set a trap. We make her think she's about to get caught, and we see how she reacts. People make mistakes when they're panicking. They reveal things they meant to keep hidden." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with new respect. "You're more devious than I expected, Beatrice." "I'm not devious. I'm a mother protecting my son from a woman who's been systematically destroying his life." I met his eyes steadily. "Are you willing to help me, even if it means playing along with Vivian's game a little longer?" He thought about it for a long moment, then nodded. "What do you need me to do?" We spent the next hour planning. Marcus would text Vivian and tell her he wanted to meet tonight, that he had a business proposition that could help her return his money. The proposition would be fake, of course, but it would give us an opportunity to watch how Vivian operated, what lies she told, how she manipulated the situation. Meanwhile, I would go through Christopher's financial records, something I should have done months ago, to see if Vivian had been stealing from him too. As his mother and someone who'd helped him set up his first investment accounts years ago, I still had access to his online banking. "One more thing," Marcus said as we prepared to leave. "That TC in her messages, Trevor Carson, I know him. He's a tech CEO, recently widowed, probably worth about $50 million. If Vivian is conning him the same way she conned me, he deserves to know. Can you reach out to him? Carefully?" "I can try. We're not close, but we travel in the same circles." Marcus stood and extended his hand again. "Thank you, Beatrice. I know this must be difficult for you, finding out your daughter-in-law is a criminal. What's difficult is knowing my son has been living with a stranger, a woman who's been lying to him every day while plotting whatever this is. When the truth comes out, it's going to destroy him. But at least he'll know the truth. That's worth something." I wasn't sure I agreed, but I nodded anyway. Sometimes the truth was more devastating than comforting lies. I drove back to Silver Lake Estates with my mind spinning with plans and contingencies. But when I pulled into the driveway at 2:30 p.m., I found something unexpected. Vivian's BMW was already there. She never came home this early. Never. My heart started racing. Had she realized her phone was missing? Had she somehow found out about my meeting with Marcus?
I sat in my car for a moment, trying to decide what to do. I could drive away, come back later, avoid confrontation. But that felt cowardly. And besides, I needed to get into Christopher's financial accounts before Vivian had a chance to cover her tracks. I got out of the car and walked to the front door, my keys ready. But before I could put the key in the lock, the door swung open. Vivian stood there, and the look on her face made my blood run cold. She wasn't surprised to see me. She wasn't confused. She was furious. "Looking for this?" She held up her second phone, the one I'd thought I'd left perfectly positioned on the kitchen counter. "You really should have been more careful, Beatrice. The phone was warm when I got home, and the bank app was still open in the background." My mouth went dry.
Vivian, I can explain. No need. Her smile was sharp and dangerous. I know exactly what you've been doing. Snooping through my phone, meeting with Marcus, plotting against me. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? How did you... I have a tracking app on that phone, you stupid old woman. The moment you opened it, I got an alert. I've been watching everything you've done today. She pulled out her primary phone and showed me the screen. There was a tracking app open showing the location history of her second phone. My trip to Cafe Venetian was marked clearly on the map. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. She'd known all along. She'd watched me discover her secrets, watched me meet with Marcus, and now she was here, and I was completely alone with her. "What are you going to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Vivian's laugh was cold and humorless. "Oh, Beatrice, you really don't understand the situation you're in, do you?" She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "Let me explain something to you. If you go to Christopher with any of this, I will destroy you. I'm not afraid of you. You should be." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn. "Here's what will happen if you try to expose me. First, I'll tell Christopher that you've been having mental health issues, that you've been confused, paranoid, making wild accusations because you're jealous of our marriage. I'll say that I've been worried about your cognitive decline for months." My stomach clenched. "He won't believe you. Won't he?" She turned to face me. "Think about it, Beatrice. You're 73 years old. You've been depressed since Thomas died. You sold your home and moved in here, giving up your independence. Christopher already feels guilty about that. If I tell you you've been acting erratically, making up stories about me having affairs and stealing money, showing him photos you claim prove something but could easily be explained away, what do you think he'll believe?" "The evidence can be explained," Vivian interrupted smoothly. "Marcus Rothschild, a potential business client I've been courting for real estate deals. The money in that account, legitimate business investments that I've been managing. The penthouse downtown, an investment property I bought for the company. I have paperwork for all of it, Beatrice. Carefully prepared, perfectly legal-looking paperwork that will make you look like a paranoid old woman seeing conspiracies where there none exist." I felt the ground shifting under me again. She'd been planning for this contingency. Of course she had. A con artist this sophisticated wouldn't leave herself exposed. "And here's the beautiful part," Vivian continued, moving closer to me. "Once I've convinced Christopher that you're having mental health issues, we'll find you a nice assisted living facility where you'll be safe and cared for. Somewhere far from here, where you can't cause any more trouble. You can't."
"I can, and I will." Her voice was cold as ice. "And here's the thing, Beatrice. That $680,000 from the sale of your house, the money sitting in your savings account that you think is your security, Christopher is your power of attorney. He set that up last year, remember? To help you manage your finances if you ever became incapacitated." My blood ran cold. I had signed those papers, trusting my son completely, trusting that he'd never abuse that authority. "If Christopher believes you're mentally incompetent," Vivian said softly, "he'll have legal access to all your money, and as his wife, I'll help him manage it. That money will disappear into care costs and medical expenses faster than you can imagine. By the time you figure out what's happening, you'll be locked in a memory care facility with nothing to your name." I stared at her, finally understanding the full scope of her plan. This wasn't just about stealing from Marcus Rothschild and a handful of other men. This was about my money, too. The $680,000 that I'd gotten from selling my house. That's why she'd been so encouraging about me moving in permanently. That's why she'd waited until after the sale was complete to start treating me like garbage. She'd been planning to steal from me all along. "You're insane," I whispered. "No, I'm practical," Vivian smiled.
You made it so easy, Beatrice. A lonely widow, desperate for connection with her only son, willing to give up everything for the illusion of family. You were the perfect mark. Christopher will see through this. He knows me. He knows I'm not crazy. Does he? Vivian tilted her head. When was the last time Christopher really looked at you, Beatrice? Really saw you? He's been so busy with work, so consumed with his career, that he barely notices you exist. You said it yourself. You feel like a ghost in this house. That's because to him, you already are. You're just an obligation, a duty, something to be managed and handled. The words cut deep because there was truth in them. Christopher had been distant, distracted, barely present even when he was home. Had he really stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as just another responsibility? So, here's what's going to happen, Vivian said, moving to the bar and pouring herself a glass of wine as if we were having a casual conversation. You're going to forget everything you discovered today. You're going to delete those photos from your phone. You're going to stay quiet, stay invisible, and let me continue building my future. In exchange, I'll let you stay here, in your little room, until you die naturally. I won't push Christopher to put you in a facility. I won't take your money. You can live out your remaining years in peace. And if I refuse, then I destroy you. I make you look crazy, take your money, and lock you away where no one will ever listen to your paranoid accusations again. Your choice, Beatrice. Comfortable imprisonment here, or actual imprisonment in a facility where you'll die alone and forgotten. I stood there, looking at this woman who had systematically dismantled my life, who had manipulated my son, who had stolen from multiple people, who was now threatening to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized if I didn't comply with her demands. And I realized something crucial. She'd made a fatal mistake. She had assumed I was alone in this. She had assumed I was the same frightened, compliant old woman who'd been letting her make the rules for 8 months. She didn't know about my meeting with Marcus, didn't know that he was ready to go to his lawyers, didn't know that I'd already sent copies of all my evidence to my own email account, backed up in the cloud where she couldn't delete them. Most importantly, she didn't know that while she'd been monologuing, enjoying her moment of perceived victory, I'd been recording the entire conversation in my pocket on my phone. You're right, I said quietly. I understand the situation now. Vivian smiled, relaxing slightly. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I understand that you're a thief, a con artist, and someone who gets off on making people feel small and powerless. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. And I understand that you just confessed to planning to defraud me of $680,000, to falsely having me declared incompetent, and to systematically stealing from multiple victims, all on a recording that I'll be giving to the police in about an hour. The color drained from Vivian's face. You recorded me? Every word, starting from when you threatened to destroy me. I held up my phone. Washington is a two-party consent state, so this recording might not be admissible in court, but it'll be enough to get the police interested, especially when combined with all the other evidence I've gathered. You bitch. She lunged toward me, trying to grab the phone, but I'd already uploaded the file to my email. She could take my phone, smash it, and it wouldn't matter. The evidence was safe. Get away from me, I said sharply, backing toward the door. If you touch me, that's assault, and I will have you arrested right now. Vivian stopped, breathing hard, her perfect composure completely shattered. Christopher will never believe you. He loves me. Maybe, but he loves me too, even if he's been too busy to show it lately. And when I show him everything, when Marcus Rothschild and the other men you've been stealing from come forward, when the police start investigating your secret accounts and your fraud, Christopher will have to face the truth. This will destroy him, Vivian said. And for the first time, I heard something almost like genuine emotion in her voice. Finding out his wife is a criminal, that his mother was right about me all along, it'll break him.
You should have thought of that before you started stealing from people. I grabbed my purse from the table by the door. I'm leaving now. I'm going directly to the police station with all my evidence, and I suggest you call a lawyer. Wait, Vivian's voice stopped me at the door. Please, just wait. I turned to look at her. She'd collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. The powerful, intimidating woman who'd been threatening me moments ago suddenly looked small and defeated. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said quietly. It started small, just taking a little money from men who hit on me, who assumed I'd sleep with them if they invested in my business. I thought I deserved it, compensation for dealing with their advances. But then it got bigger, easier. The money kept coming, and I kept taking it. And my son? Was he just another mark? She looked up at me, and I saw something like shame in her eyes. No, I did love Christopher when I married him, or at least I thought I did. But then I saw how much money was out there, how easy it was to take from people who had so much they'd never miss it. And Christopher's life seemed so small in comparison. His lawyer's salary, this house, the respectable but boring existence. I wanted more. So you built a secret life with stolen money. I was going to leave him eventually. Once I had enough money stashed away, once the penthouse was paid off, I was going to disappear. Start over somewhere else, somewhere nobody knew me. Portugal, maybe, or Costa Rica. Places where money goes far and questions aren't asked. And me? I asked. What was your plan for me? Vivian looked away. I needed you gone. You were too observant, too present. I tried to make you so uncomfortable that you'd leave on your own, but you wouldn't. So, yes, I was going to have Christopher declare you incompetent and take your money. I needed it for my exit fund. The casual way she admitted to planning to rob and institutionalize me should have made me angrier, but instead, I just felt sad. Sad for Christopher, who'd loved this woman. Sad for all the victims she'd manipulated. Sad for Vivian herself, who'd thrown away her life and her soul for money. It's over now, I said quietly. One way or another, this ends today. I walked out of that house and got into my car. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. But I did it, started the engine, and drove away from Silver Lake Estates, possibly for the last time. I didn't go to the police station. Not yet. First, I went to Christopher's law firm. Morrison and Blackwell occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming high-rise in downtown Seattle. I'd only been there once before, years ago, when Christopher had first made partner. The receptionist looked surprised to see me, but called Christopher's office immediately. He came out to meet me in the lobby within minutes, his face creased with concern. "Mom, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "No, sweetheart, everything is not okay. We need to talk, somewhere private." He led me to a small conference room, closing the door behind us. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" I pulled out my laptop and phone. "What I'm about to show you is going to be very difficult, but I need you to see everything before you make any decisions. Can you do that?" "Of course, but just watch, please." Over the next hour, I showed Christopher everything. The Instagram posts, the society page mentions, my photos from the Apex Hotel, the messages from Vivian's second phone, the bank account with nearly $500,000, the evidence of fraud against Marcus Rothschild and at least 5 other men, the $2.3 million penthouse purchased with stolen money, and finally the recording of Vivian's confession and threats from just an hour ago. Christopher's face went through a devastating progression of emotions: confusion, disbelief, denial, anger, and finally, heartbreak. By the time I finished, he was staring at the conference table with tears running down his face. I don't understand," he whispered. "She was my wife. I loved her. How could I not see this?" "She was very good at hiding it," I said gently. "And you were working so hard giving her the life you thought she wanted.
You didn't see it because she didn't want you to. She was going to have you declared incompetent? She was going to steal from you? His voice broke. My own wife was planning to destroy my mother. But she didn't, because I fought back. I reached across the table and took his hand. And now we're going to make sure she faces consequences for what she's done. Christopher nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. What do? We call the police. We call Marcus Rothschild and the other victims. We make sure that Vivian can't hurt anyone else. I squeezed his hand, and then we figure out how to move forward. Together. The next few hours were a blur. Police interviews, victim statements, lawyers. Marcus Rothschild arrived with his own attorney and his own evidence of Vivian's fraud. By late afternoon, the police had secured a warrant for Vivian's arrest. Christopher and I drove back to Silver Lake Estates together to find police cars already in the driveway. Vivian was being led out in handcuffs, her perfect hair disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying. She saw us and screamed, "Christopher, tell them this is all a mistake. Your mother is confused. She's making all of this up." But Christopher just watched silently as they put her in the police car. He didn't defend her, didn't try to stop them, just watched the woman he'd loved being taken away for fraud, theft, and attempted exploitation of an elderly person.
That night, Christopher and I sat in the kitchen of the house in Silver Lake Estates, drinking tea in silence. Finally, he spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for not seeing what was happening to you, for letting her treat you that way, for being so focused on work that I didn't notice my own mother was being abused in my house." "You didn't know," I said. "She was very convincing." "That's not an excuse. You're my mother. I should have protected you." He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "What you did, standing up to her, investigating, gathering evidence, you were braver than I've ever been." "I was just a mother protecting her son." "No, you were a woman who refused to be invisible anymore." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm going to make this right. This house, it's yours now. All of it. No more tiny room, no more rules, no more feeling like a guest. This is your home, and I'm going to make sure you feel like it." "Christopher, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." His voice was firm. "And when this is all over, when the divorce is finalized and Vivian is in prison where she belongs, we're going to figure out what comes next. Together, as a family." 3 months later, I was sitting in that same kitchen, but everything was different. Christopher and I had worked with a contractor to convert the house into a true home for both of us. I had the entire main floor now, including what used to be Vivian's home office, turned into a beautiful sitting room where I could read and entertain friends from my book club. Vivian was awaiting trial on multiple counts of fraud and theft. Marcus Rothschild and 5 other victims had come forward, and prosecutors were confident she'd spend at least 5 years in prison. The penthouse had been seized as proceeds of crime. The money in her secret accounts was being distributed back to her victims. Christopher was seeing a therapist to deal with the betrayal and to understand how he'd missed so many warning signs. He'd cut back his hours of work and was home most evenings now, and we'd started having dinner together every night, really talking for the first time in years. And me? I was no longer invisible, no longer afraid, no longer willing to make myself small for anyone's convenience. The night Vivian said, "Don't wait up for me," she thought she was dismissing me, putting me in my place. But instead, she'd awakened something in me that I thought I'd lost, the strength to fight back. That midnight, when everything came crashing down, when the police took her away in handcuffs, Vivian had come to understand a truth she should have learned long ago. Underestimating a 73-year-old woman who has nothing left to lose is a mistake you only make once. I was Beatrice Eleanor Whitmore. I had survived heartbreak, loneliness, and manipulation. I had exposed a criminal and saved my son from a life built on lies. And I was finally, truly home.